Good morning guys and welcome back to Friday's episode of Bareham Engines. So guys, before we start, I haven't done this for a while. I know a lot of people don't like me doing this, but please, if you haven't done already, please hit that subscribe button and hit the like button there guys. It really helps us like you wouldn't believe. So, today's video. So guys, there is the Focus RS Mark 1. Ready for Steve, the owner, to come and collect tomorrow morning. Yeah, everything's gone through on this one. Obviously, ground the crank, bored it, thoroughly gone through the head. I-beam rods, forged pistons, competition crank bearings. As I say, everything balanced and sized correctly, as we normally do, with all new gaskets and seals, etc. Hopefully, it's all going to be all right and fetches good power when we hear back from Steve in the near future. So what we've got going on over here, guys, we have an Audi V6. Now this one actually has been sitting over in the corner there, waiting to be done, because obviously we've had things on the boring bar and been really busy lately. And also I've been off not very well. So as you can see, what we've got to do with this one, it's got a scored bore. Now these are an Aliasil bore. They're a V6. I'm not sure what it's out of, whether it's the 3 litre or what, to be honest with you. I know it sounds ridiculous, but half the time I don't know. So what I've done is I've measured it up for an off-the-shelf liner at Westwood, and the liner I have chose is this one here, which is a WCL 25 EFL, which is a flanged liner. Now what I've got to do when I get the liner is I've got to modify the length to the correct length, or the length I want, and also I've got to turn down the flange diameter to the diameter that I want also, because whether you can see in there, it's fairly close in between the bores. So fortunately, because this is an aluminium block, we don't put it in with anything like the interference of a cast block, so it's not going to disturb the bore next to it. So the only other issue with doing these is, if you see down there, the top of the mains cap, which is quite deep actually, it's probably 1.5 inches deep. We have to machine a little bit about there, just so the head of the boring bar can go down far enough to bore, because one side of it is like a blind hole in effect. So obviously that's what I'm doing now. I've bored it out with one more cut to go. I'm just going to wait for the liner to arrive so I can just verify the outside diameter. We've also got to put a hole through each side of the liner like that. So it's a bit of a palaver this, guys, but the only other issue with doing the V6, obviously with boring it, is setting it up on the boring bar, because we have the 45-degree angle. Which brings me, guys, to my next subject. Now this is a bit of a weird story actually. I don't know whether you'll find this interesting. We do. It's one of those strange sort of coincidences. Now, because we do quite a lot of V8 engines, like the V8 Rovers, the TVRs, things like that, and they've all got the 45-degree angle with the block faces, which makes it a bit of a rigmarole for us to set up on the head facer, which we like to do it over there on the milling machine. What we used to do is we used to borrow a V8 jig, the 45-degree one, which I think originally came from America. Absolute hen's teeth, and we used to borrow that from a company about half a mile away called Car Engines. Now Car Engines used to be our competitor, but we always got on really well with them. It was owned by Graham at Ultra Parts, who we still buy all our bits from, but then it was bought out from Graham. 2 other guys bought it, and eventually they closed. But when Car Engines were going, which they've been going probably as long as I think as long as my old boss was going, really, they had these V8 jigs. Don't know where they got them originally from, but we used to borrow them every time we had a V8 block. Now we've got quite a few more V8 blocks, and we need a jig of our own. And the reason for that is because Car Engines shut down, and what they did was auction off nearly all of their machinery, their tooling, jigs, all the rest of it. We did actually ask them for the V8 jigs, but they just auctioned them off. And they went, and that was the end of it. And since then, and before then, I've been looking for some from America, from here, and I just can't find them. So I got Tom Upton, our welding guy and fabricator, to make us a jig. Now, we left it with Tom for 2-3 weeks, And then very strangely, he came in here one day with this jig in his hands. And I thought, from a distance, I thought, that looks familiar. And he said, there's a guy that he's met, a customer of his in Barnstable, and he said, do you want to come over to my place because I'm selling off all my sort of home gear? So Tom goes over there and he found this jig. Now, it just turns out that it's the exact jig. It is the jig that Car Engines used to own. The guy, it just so happens, as I say, it was a national auction, but this guy from Barnstable has gone and bought this V8 jig, took it home, never used it, sort of knows how rare it is, and said to Tom, Tom sort of spotted it, and Tom thought, well, I'm making them a jig, I wonder whether they'll be interested. So he's brought it down here, and it was the jig that we've always used and always been after. So over here it is, guys, it is fixed to the V8 block, and you can see how it works. It's got several bolts in it, so it's two separate sort of angle plates, and they just bolt into a mains cap. And obviously you can see there how easy it makes to face and bore the block now. So yeah, funny little story, guys, bit of a coincidence, but absolutely magic that we've been reunited with that jig, because they are hen's teeth. We've given the guy about 500 quid for them, but it's going to cost all of that for Tom to make a set of those. And obviously by the time we've got them machined and all the rest of it. So yeah, what a result, and a bit of a strange story. Right then, guys, as you can see, I have machined it for the liner. So we've got the flange there. So what I've done is, you can see we're probably about 1 millimetre away from the other bore, so we don't want to go any further than that, but it's left us with a 2mm thick flange, which is going to be ideal. Obviously the head gasket on this second cylinder is going to be seating on the flange, so you need to make sure it's seated and faced, and then it should be absolutely perfect, really. So what I do when I'm custom machining the liner is I'll do the machining in the block, obviously by measurement and by visual, just to make sure everything's okay, and then I'll machine the liner to suit. And here is the liner, guys. So what I've done is machined it to length, so that is the exact length now, so it will come perfectly right to the bottom of there. We don't need to go as far down as the top of the mains cap there. We've left about 20 thou protrusion of the liner once it's in fully, and the diameter there is, once we've heated the block, that is going to be a nice slide fit. So there's going to be no gap around the outside of that line, the flange of the liner at all. It's going to be a nice sliding fit. I've machined the bore with a 3 thou interference, but these aluminium blocks, when you heat the block, they expand about 5 or 6 thou, believe it or not. So I'm going to put this liner in situ, still on the boring bar, because they do slide in once you heat it up. So what I've done is I've cooled the liner, and now I'm just going to heat the block in situ, and in theory we're going to slide the liner down there with a bit of this 620 glue, which is what I put all the liners in with. Then I've made a tool that slides nicely in the top, and if it needs a little bit of persuasion, then we use our bar and a hammer, basically. The trouble is with pressing it, we've got to set it all up, and it's, to be honest, it's quicker just to do it like this, because obviously the press is pretty slow. So once that glue starts going off with the heat, you've got to basically get it in fairly smartish. So that is the next step, guys. Let's get this block heated up and get the liner in. Right then, guys, what is this one all about, you are thinking? I know. So if we just go back quite a few months now, regarding the Series 1 Landrover engine that we did for a company called Devon 4x4, a good customer of ours. Devon 4x4 restore, well, they do all stuff 4x4 basically. They are restoring a Landrover for a customer of theirs. They give us the contract to do the engine. We've done loads of Series 1 Landrover engines in the past. One of the items that we change in that engine is the cam bearings. Now, we bought the cam bearings from a company called Craddock's. This was November last year that we bought the bearings, and Devon 4x4 had the engine back in December. So In April, we had a phone call off Craddock saying emergency, there's a big problem. Apparently the crank bearings that were produced just before, around that time that we had ours, a lot of them have been faulty. So it's the material, something to do with the zinc or something like that in there. The material's faulty, few of them have failed, which is obviously catastrophe for the engine. You know what it's like with those Land Rovers, the cam bearings in the block, it's a fairly major job to change them. So obviously the engine's gone back to Devon 4x4 who have put it in the vehicle, but the vehicle has not yet been finished and gone back to their customer. So how do we leave it from there? So Craddock's said they will have the engine back and fit the bearings when they get them. They're due the bearings in about 6 weeks' time. This was in April, mind. So month after month went, still no bearings. Obviously, Devon 4x4 are kicking off because the vehicle's nearly done, which is fair enough. They get the engine out of the vehicle back to us. We then sent the engine, we kept the engine for a while, and Craddock's rang us up about a month ago, I think, end of July, and said the bearings are on their way. So we sent the engine up to them, and it turns out that there's a delay on the bearings. So they've got the engine now. Don't know whether they've got it in bits yet, but we keep ringing them every week and a half, something like that. Still no bearings and no ETA on them. So where did the thumbnail and title come in? So Devon 4x4's customer is now threatening legal action. So I'm not quite sure where he stands with that, because obviously we've invoiced Devon 4x4, they must have invoiced him. So I would have thought that you can only be taken to court from the people that you've invoiced, basically. So they would have to take Devon 4x4 to court. Not sure what they're taking them to court for. Don't quite know how that's going to work. And then maybe they would have to take us to court. I don't know. But it's an awkward position for us all, guys. Fortunately, today, John has actually got hold of a company I've never heard of before. And they know all about this situation. They said that they were notified in April, which would make sense because that's when Craddock got in touch with us. He said it's been a major thing. He did go on to tell me a bit about the problem with the bearings. There's sort of quite a lot of zinc content or something in there which is going belly up. I don't know what he was on about, but he knows of the problem. He says he has got 2 sets of the new bearings, which Craddock's haven't got yet. So we've managed to purchase both of those sets because, as you know, we've got a Series 1 Land Rover out there waiting for a set of those bearings as it is. It's been there for weeks and weeks, if not months. So we need to get that one out as well because our customer is giving us jip about that. So yeah, that's where we are, guys. So my next step now is to get in touch with Craddock's and say, look, if we send you these bearings, will you fit them? If they're not willing to do that, we're going to have to get the engine back here and we're going to have to fit them ourselves so it can get back to Devon 4x4 so their customer doesn't take them to court. So it's one of them, guys. It's left everything a bit sort of sour, and you know, we want to get that engine done and finished as much as Devon 4x4 do and as much as his customer does, you know. But you can understand where everyone's coming from, especially their customer wants his vehicle back. So that's where we are with it, guys. Just fingers crossed that these bearings turn up and everything's good and we can get these 2 engines on their way. But yeah, what a nightmare. And there we go, guys. My plan worked. The liner is in. It is seated nicely on the base of that flange. I've set up the bore gauge to the standard bore, which is 84.5, and obviously checked all the other bores, checked the neighbouring bore there to make sure it hasn't distorted. It's absolutely perfect. So all I've got to do now, guys, is set this one up, machine it out. We've got to face that side of the block and hone that bore, and this job is done. Successful. Well, that is it for another video, I'm afraid, guys. It is Friday, so have a great weekend. And until Monday's video, we'll see you then. You take it easy, guys. Cheers.